Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni. I'm your host today, joined by Cody Thompson, my co-host. How you doing this morning, Cody?
Better than I deserve, Pat. There you go.
Better than I deserve, no doubt. Tracy, how are you doing?
I'm not bad today, Pat.
That's good. We got the regular crew. Matt, how you doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Matt's thumbs up. All right, we got a very interesting, I think we always try to make it very interesting, but I'm particularly interested in this. Cody, what's the topic for today?
Signs of team success.
That's right. Signs of team success. And what we mean by that is, how do you know that working genius is working on your team, that it's actually adding value? And there's some very specific things that your team will probably be doing if it's really digesting, internalizing, and using working genius. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how you know that's happening. So where should we start? Tracy, where do you get to go today? What's the first sign of teams working with working genius?
So I think the first sign is have you built it into your vocabulary? Are you using it throughout the day?
Right. Is it made its way into the lexicon of the conversations that you're having? And what are some good examples of that, Cody?
This happens a lot at our office, and I see it happening on teams that are using this really well, which is that not only can you identify those 6 activities from wonder all the way through to tenacity, but the way it comes up in conversations often is, when you clarifying, oh, hey, if an inventor is talking, they're like, oh, I'm inventing right now. Or if a person is galvanizing, they're like, oh, I'm galvanizing right now. So it just sort of works its way into the context. It gives a framework for what's happening in a given meeting or a conversation. Or you might even say something like, hey, we need some invention in this meeting and we don't have it. Let's go find some.
Right. The words, I think we've said this before, turn into verbs. Because something I say almost on a daily basis, hey, I'm inventing here, I'm not galvanizing. Because when I invent, I say things like I know it's true. And I can tell people are like evaluating it. And I'm like, hey, oh, by the way, I'm not asking you to move on this. I'm just literally throwing it against the wall. And so we're clarifying what verb we're using, which of the 6 types of working genius.
And Pat, you're so passionate about when you do invent, you have so much passion that it actually looks like galvanizing. So it's
right.
You're constantly saying, hey, I'm eyeing here, I'm not G'ing. And that helps us figure out where we are in the process.
Otherwise, it could look like I'm coming up with these ideas and it almost looks like I'm saying, why aren't we doing this yet? And I can kind of tell, and I'm like, oh, no. Don't think that you need to act on this. Don't think that I think we should have already done this. For all I know, what I'm saying is a terrible idea. I'm just inventing with a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah, and this is where you kind of know that we all have some capacity for all 6, because when you say, when it sounds like you're galvanizing, there is this natural thing that goes, oh, I should start the enablement process. I should start moving along this. But when you clarify, hey, I'm inventing, it triggers in your brain to say, oh, right now what he wants from me is actually evaluating the idea. He needs discernment. He wants us to participate in this ideation phase, not go straight to enablement.
Right. I think about just in the last hour, how we use this, because Jackie had a baby. Yay, Harrison, God bless you all. And so Jackie's out of work right now, and she's a GT, and she galvanizes me around my speech. So Matt's taking that over for her, and last night I did a speech with Australia, and Matt had to set it up. And Cody, you said this morning, hey, Matt, you're galvanizing. That's great. And the idea here is we know when somebody's doing something outside of their genius, and we talk about it. Like, oh, you're temporarily filling in for Jackie and galvanizing. And so that makes its way into our vocabulary. And Matt knows, yeah, I'm going to do something outside of my area of genius and I'm going to do it well. So that's a sign that the team is actually using this to know that we're talking about it in a day-to-day way.
Tracy, you've got all the signs here. What's the next one?
I think the next one is you really know one another. So, Pat, you have an example of how people, when using other profiles, don't know one another?
Yeah, for years, my dad used to always do this, God rest his soul, and a lot of people do it. We say, what's your Myers-Briggs type? And they're like, I'm an ESPN, because they don't remember. And boy, whenever I talk to people and I say, when I ask them about their Myers-Briggs, so many people go, yeah, I did that years ago. I don't really remember. And what we're finding is that teams that use this well, and I will say most of the teams we know that are using this, people remember one another's type and their own because it's so connected to what they're doing day to day.
It's not only connected to what they're doing day to day, it is simpler. Like I remember I took the Strengths Finder in college, and when people ask me what my Strengths Finder is, I end up saying like, is confidence one? Is that a strength? I think I might have confidence, but I actually don't even remember what they are. You remember woo or another one, but I think what makes this so usable and it does give you a chance to get to know another person really well is by saying like, oh, I can remember not only what my two letters are, discernment and galvanizing. It's pretty simple for me to look around the room in a small team and go, oh, I know that they have invention or tenacity or wonder, and I can tap into that in a way that is not true of some of those other assessments because you don't. Even if you know your own Myers-Briggs type, imagine trying to keep track of all those letters for your whole team. It's a little bit harder.
Here's an example of the first two things that we just said about using it in your vocabulary and remembering what people are. So I did an offsite with a guy who doesn't like assessments, and he had literally like 12 other people in the room during this offsite. And when we went around and did the team effectiveness exercise where he had to give them feedback, he did it using their working genius. So he would be like, okay, so here's what I love about you. Your discernment is fantastic, and we need more of your discernment. Now, I realize you're not tenacious, so that's okay. Let's rearrange the job. So it was both, he remembered everybody's types and he was using it in the vocabulary for how he was talking about managing the team. And that's a pretty good sign that it works, not to mention the fact that the guy hated assessments and these kind of tools.
And how cool is it as a team member to feel seen like that? That's amazing that he could remember everyone's types. And as one of his employees, I would have felt really good and seen by him.
Yeah, and you could tell they did.
And they invite you into using your genius. Like when somebody says, "Oh, I know you're a discerner," and they say, "Hey, I actually need you in this room or in this meeting or in this conversation because I want you to use the thing that you identified and that we identified you're good at." It's like the best feeling in the world. When you guys bring me things and say, "Hey, we just yesterday we had a website meeting. We're redoing the homepage of the Working Genius website to accommodate the book that's launching September 27th, by the way. I'll just plug that in
that's
there.
A little commercial. If you want to go out and buy the book, pre-order the book right now, you can. Wherever books are sold, the 6 Types of Working Genius.
Yeah, be the first. But they said, "Hey, Cody, we've taken a stab at this. We had a couple inventors take a stab at it, but now we just need someone with discernment to kind of walk through." And it was like, that felt wonderful. It felt like I felt known the way Tracy's talking about, and I get to use my gift. That's a really, really cool feeling to have on a team, and quite frankly, drives results.
Right. People are using this well on your team and it's working when it comes up in vocabulary and people remember one another's types. Another one is that people are constantly referring back to where they are in the altitude of a project or a conversation. Like, where are we at the higher levels of WI and sometimes we jump around and we get altitude sickness. So tell us about how that plays out in the real world, Cody, like when you're working with a team, how you see this working.
Well, this is the one that I think is most like inextricably tied to meetings, because that is definitely where I feel like when teams are successful, they are using this to categorize or contextualize their meetings. So if you are walking into a conversation or if we're having a meeting and you say, "Hey, here's the elevation we're staying at. Right now we're having a brainstorming conversation and we're going to play in almost all wonder, invention, and discernment." If you do that in a meeting or conversation, it just gives you the right context for that conversation. This is what tends to make for better meetings, better outcomes at the end of meeting, and avoiding that altitude sickness. And the same is true, the way you describe it is sort of like all of these activities are required for a given project. So you can look at any project and kind of see, where are we at in the process? Are we still in the invention phase? Have we crossed the sort of the crucible of discernment into action, into galvanizing our team around this? And that alone, this might be the most impactful, even beyond the vocabulary, in terms of the results that you're seeing, is beyond the vocabulary, beyond knowing your team members. you're going to see increased productivity if you use this tool to categorize the conversations and the projects that you're on.
An example of this just the other day, we had a leadership team meeting and we were talking about new ideas. We were literally trying to figure out what our biggest priorities were as an organization. And one of the members of our team, Julie, who's a DT, which means she's really about using her judgment to get things done, she started to get kind of nervous. And I remember saying, hey, Julie, we're up here at WID right now. So let's not worry too much about implementing this. We'll figure that out as we go through the activation stage. But right now, let's stay early. And she was like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Because she was immediately going to, well, how are we going to get that done? How much resources is that going to take? And we were like, no, we don't have to do that yet. And otherwise, what happens is we either get sucked down into the weeds or we get pulled up into the clouds, both of which are great if that's what we're meant to be.
Exactly. And what was really beautiful about that conversation is Julie did not take that personally at all. There were no it was super safe. There were no personal implications to her. We just said, hey, let's stay up here. And it was awesome. We just moved on and it was super clarifying.
Yeah, a person shouldn't feel bad like, oh, yes, I gravitate toward one end of the scale or to the middle. Mm-hmm. They're actually like, oh, thank you for reminding me that that's what I do naturally, and that's not necessarily called for right now. More than any other tool I've ever seen, nobody takes that as a criticism or a judgment. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, yeah, I like being in the clouds, and so we're done with the clouds right now. I have to kind of adjust. Yep. So I think that's a really important sign that a team is using it well when people are like, hey, are we supposed to be inventing right now or implementing? And it's like, oh yeah, that should matter.
And that's why it's so important on even project teams or matrix teams or teams that are new, is this can help you walk through the proper stage of each part of the project. And so that's why I love what you said. There was no defensiveness or even hurt feelings in that, because all we were doing was clarifying, oh, hey, we're going to use your tenacity, but it's just not right now. Eventually, that's going to be really, really helpful to us. So let's just kind of put that away for now and then stay in the right elevation. That makes teams and the meetings and conversations that we're having extremely successful when they can do that well.
And in 2 weeks, we'll have a meeting and she'll be like, hey, boys, because me and Bo are the inventors. Hey, the time for invention is over. This is a meeting about implementation, and we're going to have to go, yeah, you're right. Thanks for reminding me.
Yep, exactly.
So the next one, another thing that teams are doing, a great sign that a team is using Working Genius successfully, is that people are leaning on each other. They're like, I'm bad at this. I need your help. Or they're saying, and they're just being vulnerable, like, I don't know how to do this. They're really, asking people to fill in for them in things that they're not good at in very specific ways.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of teams doing this well, because this is where the tool is both a personality instrument and productivity tool, in the sense that when we talk about the foundation of teamwork and at the top of the pyramid is results, the bottom of that pyramid is vulnerability-based trust. And this is built into Working Genius, where you have to say to your team members, hey, you know what? Of these 6 activities, these 2 I'm really bad at, and I need tons of help in order for our project to get moving. And so it is like, it's actually, every time you do that, it's not only helpful for the project, it actually is strengthening the team from a behavioral standpoint, because it's leading with vulnerability. Hey, I need your help, or I don't have invention, I don't have tenacity. We really need your enablement right now. Those are wonderful things that strengthen the fiber of a team.
Yeah, I love when this happens with Matt, our engineer, and our, the guy who does all the data around the Working Genius. And he'll say to me, I'll say, what do you think of this idea? And he'll say, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. I say, well, what's an idea that you would come up with? And he's like, I don't have eye. Yeah. And he's like literally saying, I could fake it, but I'm not good at inventing. But he's really, really good at discerning. And the fact that we know that, otherwise it would be so annoying. It's like, well, it's fine that you can tell me it's not going to work, but if you can't come up with a better idea, maybe you should keep your opinion to yourself. And it's like, no, don't keep your opinion to yourself. Use your D, and then when you don't have I to use, it's okay to go, I'm terrible at that. And we go, yeah, that's a good sign of vulnerability that he knows that. Most people, without things like the Working Genius, don't know when to admit they're bad at something. Mm-hmm. And so they would discern an idea and then try to come up with a new idea. And if they're not good at that, that's not that helpful.
I sometimes wish we recorded the 5 minutes before we record the podcast, because it really is a perfect example of working genius, where Tracy, me, and Matt all have discernment as a genius, and you're the only one with invention. And what we do for 3 minutes at least before the podcast is try to name the podcast. And what that looks like is today, you probably threw out a dozen names that we were all like, no, not that one, not that one, not that one. And on a team where you don't have that level of vulnerability, that would probably get really frustrating for the inventor. But when we know what we're doing and that we need each other to do it well, you can throw out 12 that we shoot down, and we know on the other side there's a good one. We just have to get there. It's really amazing.
And it is painful because it's amazing. And Tracy's my editor, and so I come up with like a character or something in the book, and she'll go, "Yeah, no, that guy doesn't work. He's a dork." And I'm like, "Oh, that's crushing me." And she's like, "Try again." And I have to realize, "Oh yeah, this is how it works." And she's not criticizing me. I'm inventing. She's discerning. She's doing a service for me. But every inventor has a little bit of like pain, but at least I don't feel bad about it. I realize this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
And then I usually throw in some E in there too, just to soften it. I tell you all the good things about what you've written, and then I use my discernment.
In fact, the other day I was talking to my wife, who's a WI, and I was telling her about a challenge I was having at work, and she's like, "Oh, let me WI that for you." And I said to her, "Oh, I love your WI, but right now I think I just need some E." So, and so if you've got a little E in there to give, that's okay. But I don't think it's a new idea right this minute. I think I just need somebody to say, yeah, that would be really hard. You're going to be okay. So it's an interesting thing how the vocabulary makes its way into our families as well.
Absolutely. Is that your full list? Because I was going to add one to the list. Is there another one?
I think there's one last one, Cody. I'll let you say it because I think you know what it is.
So this is the one I added, the hiring one.
Yeah.
Okay. This was one we had this list together, and then I was like, there's one other way that we could think about a team successfully using this. And the teams that I feel like the ones that I've observed that have gotten working genius in their bones, and they're using it as their common language, and they're assessing where they're at in their projects around it. What happens next? This is where I feel like, boy, this team is on the right track, and they're going to make this happen. Is when they go identify what the gaps are in their team, not from a technical standpoint, but from a working genius standpoint. And then they realize when we're hiring the next person we hire, we need to bring someone in who has, whether it's tenacity or enablement or invention, whatever it is that they need on the team aside from a technical proficiency. That's when I feel like they've said, boy, we're totally bought into this concept. We'll hire someone whose resume is mostly matching what we need, but we're going to put a huge emphasis on the fact that we have a gap from a working genius standpoint, and we need X. And so that's where I feel like of all those previous things, when you're going out and finding a new person and you're using this as an evaluation to help figure out who's going to fit best into our team makeup, that's really when I feel like it's a flywheel at that point.
Oh gosh. And when you love somebody, like we've had situations where we found somebody that we just loved and would really fit into our culture, but we really needed a specific role. And we could say, I love him or I love her, but they would be miserable at that job. And that helps us. And it's because of their working genius. And so there's cultural fit. I was explaining this to my 16-year-old son the other day because we were talking about hiring. And for the first time in his life, he was like, wow, this is fascinating what you do, Dad, which was an amazing moment. And he said, so when you're hiring, how do you go about that? And he was fascinated by the idea that there's cultural fit, which is our values. And then there's the working genius stuff, which can they do the job? And those are so very different. Now, we will always say cultural fit is most important. But if you really need somebody to get something done and you put them in a job that's not using their genius or worse yet is tapping into their frustration, you're gonna put that relationship with them in a really bad place. And so great teams will be talking about this, like what are the two letters that we want most? And what are the two that we probably can't have? And that's a wonderful thing. That's frankly, that should be something that everyone who hires uses. And I realize people are like, well, is that legal? And the answer is absolutely it is, because all you're doing is trying to help a person be successful. So companies just have to figure out how to do that in a way that doesn't feel capricious.
we've had more interviews in the last handful of months than we've had in the previous couple years, it seems like. And what I find being on this side of the interview is I have such care and empathy for the person that's sitting either on the other side of the table or the Zoom screen or wherever we're at interviewing, saying, it gave me more language to say, boy, I don't need to sell you on this job, and I don't want to be sold on who you are. If this is who you are, you're going to love this. And it's really fun to sit in a seat and say, boy, I really, we have that concept, scare them with sincerity at the end of an interview. And in some ways, Working Genius allows us to do that even more than just the cultural standpoint, which is like, hey, we think you're a cultural fit. You're going to love it here if you're humble, hungry, smart. But hey, this job, if you, like, we really, like, I think about Julie, we thought who should fit in this role. And there's a cultural fit with a discernment, tenacity preference. And she had that. And we were like, boy, she's probably going to love this. She slides right onto the team, starts delivering value right away, is loving her role. It's such a gift to be able to go all the way there with how they're wired and the work that they'll enjoy, and then put them in a seat on the bus that really suits their unique wiring.
And the scare them with sincerity is like, let's say you have a job and they have to have tenacity. And you say to them, and in interviews, people will say things like, generically, like, so are you detail oriented and do you follow through and are you responsible? And nobody's going to say, no, I have no attention to detail. I don't follow through and I'm not very responsible. But when you go, hey, listen, we need somebody with tenacity, that means you're going to push and push and push to get things done. You're going to jump through obstacles. You're going to love it. You're never going to be happy if we don't get things done. And it's going to give you joy and energy to finish things and push things across the starting line. If you're like that, you are going to be so happy in this job. If you're not, you're going to be miserable. And that's enough to make a person go, oh, okay. Well, maybe this isn't the right role.
Well, it's so funny. We just did an interview. The newest person we brought on is this woman, Ashley. She's going to be great. We were asking her this very question in the interview. Like, we even showed her some of the systems and we're like, hey, so here's the behind the scenes systems. And we were looking for tenacity as part of this job. And so we were like, tell us about how that's played out in your previous roles. And she said, well, she had run this camp and she has this inbox full of emails from parents and students and all that. And she's like, when I finish, when my inbox goes to zero, I throw a little party for myself. She's like, I'm the only person that's invited and it's wonderful. And I feel so accomplished. And I was like, yes, you're going to love this. That is the definition of tenacity. So it really is amazing when you have that level of language and you can bring someone into the team and know that they're going to love the job.
That's right. So if you're using this on your team, and so many teams are, and so many of these ideas have come from people that have told us how they're using it, it's going to make its way into your vocabulary. People are going to remember their own and one another's types. You're going to be constantly in meetings going, at what altitude is this conversation? People are going to really lean on and ask for one another's help and be vulnerable about when they need that help. And when you hire, you're not going to think about hiring people without including the working geniuses that are going to be most helpful. Those are some signs that this is working for your team. Oh, Cody, you have another thought?
Yeah, I'm putting my hand up because I'm just realizing I'm going to use Working Genius. We did an absolute horrible job galvanizing this ask around the book launch and the pre-sales. So you're not a galvanizer. Tracy, you're not. I'm going to do it here at the end, which is, hey, we just put the book up on all those sites that you can pre-order it on. And there are 15,000 people that listen to this, that have benefited from this. The book Pat wrote on this is incredible. And it goes into the story and the characters that are discovering their own working geniuses, and then into the application in the back. And I would just love it if the fans of this, the people who've been touched by this and the people who've benefited from Working Genius in their lives would just go, we're with a new publisher too. It'd be so fun to say, hey, these people are loving this and there's a bunch of pre-sales really early. That would be wonderful for us. And thank you so much for being with us. This is our 29th episode since we launched Working Genius. It's just been fantastic for us. And this launch of the book, I think, is just the next phase of getting this out there to help more people. So we appreciate all that you guys have done for us, all the listeners, and would love for you to jump in and support the book.
Very good. Thanks for galvanizing that, Cody, because you're right. I'm not good at it. And thank you all for listening and for sending us your thoughts and ideas and for your passion around Working Genius. And we look forward to talking to you next time on the Working Genius podcast. God bless.